When Bob Crane went from being the beloved star of the TV show Hogan's Heroes to becoming the victim of a terrible homicide, fans were left in shock. The was horrific, and so everybody was waiting for some comforting news from the police that the murderer had been caught. However, to everyone's surprise, only more bad news was in store, because when the police got to the scene of the crime, they couldn't gather enough physical evidence to identify the murderer. For decades, whenever they came close to identifying someone, it turned out to be the wrong person. Now, decades later, new evidence has emerged, and it may finally shed light on who killed Bob Crane. But be warned, the truth isn't good. Stepping back to a simpler time, Bob Crane was born Robert Edward Crane on July 13, 1928. Growing up in Stamford with his older brother and their parents, the youngest Crane loved music and wasn't shy about it. By the time he was 11, Crane had helped himself to some sticks and made drums his obsession. He later stated, "I knew I wanted to be an entertainer just as soon as I started studying the drums in grade school." This wasn't a passing fancy, by the way, because by the time he was in junior high, he was organizing local drum and bugle parades with some of his friends from the neighborhood. Moving on to high school, Crane didn't waste any time joining every music department possible. He wasn't only part of the school's orchestra, he joined up with its marching and jazz bands too. Crane was so good, and he soon found himself a member of the Connecticut Symphony Orchestra while he was still in high school. After school, he joined the Connecticut Army National Guard. The following year, he married his high school sweetheart, Ann Terzian. Following his marriage, Crane was honorably discharged from the National Guard after 2 years of service. Discharged and married, young Crane needed another source of income, and he turned to the one thing he knew how to do well, and which hadn't failed him yet: drums. He said about his situation at the time, "I played with many bands in Connecticut and New York. I knew I didn't want to be a band drummer all my life, but the drums supported me while I looked for a job in radio." Crane eventually got the job on the radio as a DJ for a Connecticut station, but he soon started doing more than DJing. One other unknown ability Crane had was his ability to communicate well. He was witty and knew quite a lot about almost everything. This additional skill helped him keep his job for the next 6 years. And you would agree that if you have been on the radio for that long, there are bound to be quite a number of fans. And having a huge following made Crane a target of other radio stations who were trying their best to poach him from his current place of employment. Crane himself only wanted to work in one of 2 places, and he was very vocal about it. "I received offers from larger cities, but I only wanted to go to either New York or Los Angeles." So, when an offer finally came from Los Angeles, it was a no-brainer, and he didn't waste a second accepting the opportunity. Even though this was a new city and a new job, the same old drums were still needed. He would do his DJing and make it more unique by accompanying whatever he was playing with drums. Crane played the drums live. From Monday through Saturday, for 4 hours every day, he did this while hosting interviews, resulting in what listeners began to call organized chaos. The show was big enough to host big celebrity guests like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, and Bob Hope. His show quickly topped the morning ratings with adult listeners, and he became king of the Los Angeles airwaves. Clearly, Crane's radio show was very exciting, and while he found some fulfillment doing it, there was more he wanted to do with himself. "I loved doing the show, but I always wanted to be an actor. I don't believe in acting school, at least not for me. The only way to learn was to act." And this was the starting point for what would be a successful yet controversial future. Crane was a hard worker and was the type to devote time to whatever he needed to perfect his skill. So, despite the fact that he was doing the radio show daily, he also began working with little theaters to develop his acting talent. Thankfully, financially, he was comfortable enough to accommodate the extra expense of learning. And learn he did. Eventually, like everything we have seen Crane put his hands into, He excelled in acting and soon got a role in the film Return to Peyton Place. This turned into a springboard for more acting roles. He did a bit of guest hosting for Johnny Carson on the daytime game show Who Do You Trust? His acting ambitions led him to apply and get appearances on The Twilight Zone, even when it was agreed that he wouldn't be credited. But that was a small price to pay for what was to come. Crane got parts in Channing, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and General Electric Theatre. Mind you, all this extra work was still being done alongside his radio show. Luckily for him, one of his big-name guests on the show would be Carl Reiner, and when Reiner showed up, Crane persuaded his guest to book him a guest appearance on The Dick Van Dyke Show. Crane had hoped to land a role on the popular show, but it turned out to be the case of getting two birds with one stone for him. You see, he landed the role on The Dick Van Dyke Show and then caught the eye of Donna Reed, who was running her own show on ABC. Reed offered Crane a guest shot on the Donna Reed Show, but he had made the most of that opportunity and gave such a brilliant performance that after the success of that episode, Crane's character, Dr. David Kelsey, was incorporated into the show's storyline, and Crane became a regular cast member. Amazingly, Crane continued to work full-time on his radio show while doing the Donna Reed Show. He did this until December 1964, when he left the show. The following year, it looked like his radio show was going to take a bigger chunk of his time. But along came Hogan's Heroes, the sitcom that would cement Crane's acting career in Hollywood. Hogan's Heroes was a CBS television sitcom set in a World War II prisoner of war camp, and it involved the sabotage and espionage missions of Allied soldiers, led by Colonel Robert Hogan, from under the noses of the oblivious Germans guarding them. Crane was offered the lead role to play Colonel Robert Hogan. The sitcom became instantly popular. Its ratings were off the roof, finishing in the top 10 in its first year. Crane recalled that he had to quit his radio show to focus on playing Colonel Robert Hogan, which was expected. It was unrealistic for him to do both time-consuming activities at the same time, and his choice wasn't a surprise either. Crane had always made it known that his passion was acting. He said concerning the switch, "I actually took in earnings to change from the radio DJ to full-time acting, but that is what I wanted to do." And honestly, it showed in how devotedly he played his character. Ask anyone old enough, and they would confirm that in the 1960s, Bob Crane was a household name. He was charming and one of the 60s television's brightest personalities. The series lasted for 6 seasons on CBS, and Crane was nominated for an Emmy Award in '66-67. As the series drew to a close, Crane and his co-stars worked on and released a feature film, The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz, set in the divided city of Berlin during the Cold War. Crane also began to spread his wings beyond Hogan's Heroes, starring with Abby Dalton in a dinner theater production of Cactus Flower. And when Hogan's Heroes was finally cancelled in '71, Crane appeared in 2 Disney films, playing the lead in Superdad and a smaller role in Gus. Returning to the theater, Crane bought the rights to a comedy play called Beginner's Luck and began touring it as its star and director at the Showboat Dinner Theater in St. Petersburg, Florida, and other dinner theaters around the country. While doing theater, Crane guest starred in a number of television shows, including Policewoman, Gibbsville, Quincy, M.E., and The Love Boat. He would later return to television with his own series, The Bob Crane Show, on NBC, but it was cancelled after 14 episodes. But behind the spotlight, people questioned Crane's professionalism. His real life was filled with secrets and controversy. He had divorced Anne, his wife of 21 years and mother of his 3 children, just so he could marry Patricia Olson, an actress who appeared on Hogan's Heroes under the stage name Sigrid Valdez. But she turned out to be just one of several women Crane had romanced on the set. Before marrying Olson, he had already initiated an affair with Hogan co-star Cynthia Lynn. the actress who played Helga. His affair with Lynn had gone on while he was still married to Anne, and when Lynn was replaced by Olsen, he started dating her. He then married Olsen on the set of the show later that year, with series co-star Richard Dawson serving as best man. But there was more to Crane that bothered his colleagues. It was revealed that Crane often videotaped and photographed his own sexual exploits. Surprisingly, this was not hearsay. There were stories of him showing filming crews pornographic photos of himself with different partners. Another uncomfortable twist in the tale was Crane's constant partner in these acts, John Henry Carpenter. Crane and Carpenter were said to have met each other after a friend introduced them during a run of Hogan. Carpenter was a regional sales manager for Sony Electronics, who often helped famous clients with their video equipment. The two men became friends and began visiting bars and nightclubs together. Crane was a big celebrity and attracted many women due to his status, and he would often introduce Carpenter to them as his manager. The two men will then photograph and videotape their joint sexual encounters. Carpenter later became national sales manager at the consumer electronics company Akai and arranged his business trips to coincide with Crane's touring schedule, allowing the two to continue videotaping their sexual encounters. Crane's son Scotty, who later wrote a book about his father, insisted that all of the women were aware of the videotaping and consented to it, but several claimed that they had no idea that they had been recorded until they were informed. But at the time when this was happening, Crane's career was suffering the backlash of such controversy, even if it sounded like a rumor. Still, some of it reached the ears of executives at Walt Disney Productions, who were not happy with Crane, stating that people talk, and it had started getting published in publications like the National Enquirer. In early 1978, Crane taped a travel documentary in Hawaii and recorded an appearance on the Canadian afternoon cooking show Celebrity Cooks. During this taping, there were claims that Crane had been unhappy and had expressed his dissatisfaction by making inappropriate jokes about death and sex. But these claims have been denied by the show's producers, who have stated that taping would have stopped if anything inappropriate had been said. Whether this was true or not, the fact was that as Crane neared his 50th birthday, he began to talk about making some changes in his life. He told his son he was divorcing Olsen and ending his friendship with Carpenter. According to reports, Crane wanted to let go of the past and restart on a clean slate. But all these plans came crashing down, as something didn't want a new Crane to emerge. 2 weeks before his birthday, Crane was found dead. Crane was discovered beaten to death in his apartment. At the time, he was living in the Winfield Place apartments in Scottsdale. He was there to do a run of beginner's luck at the Windmill Dinner Theater. And on this afternoon of June 29, his co-star, Victoria Ann Berry, entered his apartment after he failed to show up for a lunch meeting and discovered his body. He had been bludgeoned to death with a weapon that was never identified, though investigators believed it to be a camera tripod. An electrical cord had been tied around his neck, culminating in a shocking and brutal death that left Hollywood completely confused. As the investigation began, Scottsdale police discovered videotapes of sexual encounters with different women, and a recurring individual in the videos was Carpenter. Fortunately for investigators, Carpenter had flown to Phoenix on June 25th to spend a few days with Crane. His rental car was impounded and searched, and it revealed several blood smears that matched Crane's blood type, and no one else of that blood type was known to have been in the car, including Carpenter. This is where the investigation started to fail miserably. The crime had happened in 1978, and at the time, Scottsdale police had no homicide division, so they just couldn't handle such a high-profile murder investigation. The crime scene itself yielded few clues. No evidence was found of forced entry, and nothing of value was missing. And with DNA testing not yet available, the Maricopa County District Attorney declined to file charges. A week after the murder, Crane's funeral was held at St. Paul the Apostle Catholic Church in Westwood, Los Angeles. Over 200 family members and friends attended, including Hogan producer Edward Feldman, and even co-stars Robert Clary and Larry Hovis, showing that despite the controversies Crane found himself in, he was loved and didn't deserve to be taken away in that manner, especially when he was about to turn his life around. Crane was later interred in Oakwood Memorial Park Cemetery in Chatsworth, California. It looked like Crane's murderer had gotten away with the crime. However, 12 years later, Scottsdale Police Investigator Barry Vassell and Maricopa County Attorney's Office Investigator Jim Raines decided to re-examine the evidence of Crane's murder and persuaded the county attorney to reopen the case. Unfortunately, DNA testing was still inconclusive on the blood found in Carpenter's rental car, but this re-examination of the scene produced another piece of evidence. It was a photograph of the car's interior that appeared to show a piece of brain tissue. The actual tissue samples that were recovered from the car had been lost, but an Arizona judge ruled that the new evidence was admissible. So, in June of the same year, Carpenter was arrested and charged with Crane's murder. 4 years later, in court, Carpenter maintained his innocence, arguing that he and Crane were on good terms. His attorney even had witnesses from the restaurant where Crane and Carpenter had eaten the evening before the murder. This was refuted by the prosecution, who had Scotty, Crane's son, testify that Crane had repeatedly said he wanted to end his friendship with Carpenter just weeks before his death. According to Scotty, his father felt Carpenter had become a hanger-on and a nuisance to the point of being obnoxious. Scotty added that Crane had called Carpenter the night before the murder to end their friendship. This, however, wasn't enough for the judge to make Carpenter hang for the murder. Moreover, his attorney pointed out that the police had done a very bad job in handling the evidence. They added that the murder weapon had never been identified or found, and the prosecution was only favoring the camera tripod theory out of pure speculation, and the fact that it fitted well into their argument given Carpenter's line of work. And to further their case, they implied that Crane had been videotaped and photographed in sexual relations with quite a number of women who might have decided to murder him themselves. And if they didn't do it, one of their various husbands and boyfriends might have been angry enough to do it for them. An example was cited of an actor who had sworn that he would get back at Crane after a violent argument occurred between them in Texas several months earlier. Long story short, Carpenter was cleared and acquitted. Until he died in 1998, he maintained his innocence, while Scotty and Maricopa County District Attorney Rick Romley were convinced that Carpenter had murdered Crane. Crane's other son, Robert David, was shy about accusing his father's wife Olson of playing a role in the murder. Left to him, she might have even planned it. As he argues, nobody got a dime out of the murder except for one person. In his will, Crane had left his entire estate to Olson while excluding his children and their mother. Robert David pointed out that his father and Olson had already separated and were mere weeks away from finalizing their divorce at the time of his death. Despite the strong suspicion, and to Robert David's dismay, investigators responded that they never characterized Olson as a suspect. Officially, Crane's murder remained unsolved, and the case became one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in entertainment history. By 2007, Olson died and was buried beside Crane at Westwood Village Memorial Park, the new resting place she had moved him to earlier. The murder case was still unsolved. 9 years after Olson's death, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office allowed Phoenix television reporter John Hook to submit the 1978 blood samples from Carpenter's rental car for retesting, using a more advanced DNA technique than the one used in 1990. Hook's investigation identified 2 sequences, one from an unknown male, and the other was too degraded to conclude. So, there was an unidentified male with Crane on the day of the murder. This unidentifiable male may have been the killer, but even if he was, there is no way to identify him now, especially since Hook's retesting used up all of the remaining DNA from the rental car and made further tests impossible.